Hey guys, welcome to Fist Fight. There are plenty of podcasts where you can get the latest news coverage and opinions. So why the hell would we do that too? Fist Fight is a podcast dedicated to one game each week. Two hosts will debate whether the game was good or bad, and then we slow things down and have a chat with an indie developer about great games you probably haven't heard of. So warm up, grab yourself some popcorn, and watch the fight.
Hello and welcome to Fist Fight, the worst podcast on the internet.
You know you started before it started recording?
Fuck.
So you got like a half a bit of yelling?
Man, that's expected but disappointing nonetheless. Just like my grades at high school.
Welcome to episode 3 of Fist Fight. I'm your host, Chris. This is your co-host, Casey. We come on here...
Howdy doo-dah.
Yeah, we come on here once a week. What? We come on once a week, and we have a little debate over one game every week. Last week was...
It's a pretty big debate we have.
It's a fist fight, you could say.
It's like...
Controversial comment.
Are you 7?
Last...
Hey Mum, I just found out what curse words are. Anyway, okay, I apologise. That's late.
It is late.
It's nearly 9 p.m.
Yeah, 9 p.m. I mean, it's not that late. I know people who finish their who do record their podcasts like 1 a.m.
Yeah, I know, that was the joke.
I think it's pretty late.
Yeah, I do too. So
I'm tired.
They didn't need to know that. They didn't know we're...
Controversial comment. We've had hard days at work.
Yeah, we
Long
get
day.
up early.
We get up early. We get the job done.
Early bird gets the worm. Okay, anyway.
So the point of this podcast is that it's a half and half. First half of the show, Casey and I.
That means like if you get up extra early for work, you get to have it. Anyway.
Yeah. Casey and I, for the first half of the show, will debate one game each week. Last week, we did Prey. And then for the second part of the show, we interview indie developers from around the world to find out about games that are great, that you probably haven't heard of, and kind of get some game development tips for you out of them. Last week, we couldn't get anyone on board. It's quite hard to organize interviews. We've got a whole ton set up for the future. Last week just didn't quite work out, so we gave you a double dose. So we did Prey for the first half, and then we did Hidden Agenda for the second half of the show. But we're going to be...
I was kind of wondering. I was like, I feel like I've done more than just 3.
Yeah. So this is... From this episode going forward, we're going to have interviews in the second part. Good. I think I've got about 6 interviews lined up. So we've got 6 weeks worth of...
No, that's good, man. I just had no idea what was going on. I was like,
yeah.
I feel like...
Yeah. No, this will not be a regular occurrence, but last week was pretty frantic. So yeah.
Just to make things clear, I don't have much to do with the post-editing side of this podcast. I'm the talent, you know,
Yeah, you're the talent, but you have no idea what's
controversial comment.
A
soft, salty voice on the internet. Soft, salty?
I don't know,
Like a
serene,
pretzel.
like a serene voice.
I'm a pretzel on the internet.
Pretzel, like it's like way too hard to stomach.
Nope. Pretzel's delicious. Don't insult me.
I'm not a fan.
All right then.
Anyway, point of this week, we are talking about Monster Hunter, the first kind of big notable game of 2018.
That was the first one that I was waiting for.
Yeah, it was the first one I was interested in playing. You can make an argument that Celeste is up there too, but
What?
Celeste, you know about that?
I mean, now you've asked me, now I have to say, yeah, I have. But before you'd asked me, I was going to be like, what's that? Because I don't give a
Controversial comment.
Monster Hunter's where it's at.
Yeah, so Monster Hunter World, it's the most notable one. We're going to talk about it this week. It's the first kind of 2018 game we're talking about on the show. And you've heard
First
about
one
it.
with the hype train.
Yeah, with the hype train. There's no way you couldn't have heard of this game. It's basically, if you have been living under a rock and haven't listened to any gaming podcasts in the last month, because that's all I've been hearing, Monster Hunter World is basically if Shadow of the Colossus was an MMO. I would say that, yeah.
I would say Monster Hunter World as if Monster Hunter was made for a Western audience.
No, not even that, just for consoles.
It's been on consoles before.
Not for a long time.
It's been on PS3 recently.
No, it was not on PS3. There was no Monster Hunter game on PS3, I don't believe.
I didn't play Monster Hunter on PS3.
Keep talking. I'm going to look that up. Keep talking.
Yeah, but I saw
know.
like at least 4 games that were supposedly on PS3. Even the portable versions were apparently ported.
Are you not
PS3.
confusing PSP?
Nah, because it was PSP, PS3. Like, I didn't play these games. Like,
would you
I'll say right now, this was my first Monster Hunter game.
No, it was mine too. It was definitely my first, yeah.
So I have heard of Monster Hunter. For someone that has never played the game before, I was reasonably familiar with the franchise. You know, I knew of the game. I'd seen gameplay before, but I'd never actually owned and played a game through.
You're kind of going through an experience it yourself. Yeah,
but
do you disagree?
I knew
do you disagree?
I was keen for
do you disagree with the point though that saying it's Shadow of the Colossus as an MMO? I think that's a pretty apt representation for someone who's never heard of Monster Hunter, which I doubt there are many people.
If someone hasn't heard of Monster Hunter, they probably don't know what Shadow of the Colossus is.
Not necessarily. No.
Well, no. In the same way that someone that doesn't know what Shadow of the Colossus is wouldn't have known what Monster. I think that both games are reasonably niche enough.
Yeah, no.
See, this isn't even what we're arguing about. We're already.
I'm upset. Warmed up. I'm upset. Yeah, we're warming up. I have had a lecturer in the past who taught students about video game development, and she knew the most niche. I've never heard of them kind of small indie games that you've never heard of, and she hasn't heard of mainstream games like Hellblade or The Last of Us.
I can understand that. I don't see how that relates to your point.
My point being, just because you say if you haven't heard of Monster Hunter World, you haven't heard of Shadow of the Colossus. I heard of Shadow of the Colossus way before I heard about Monster Hunter.
I mean,
this is not what.
To understand your argument, Shadow of the Colossus is a game that has been around for eons. Instead of being
2006, 2007.
Yeah,
so maybe like 10 years, like 10 years plus. 10 years plus.
But instead of Shadow of the Colossus being updated, etc., it's just been remastered, essentially. It's been pretty much the same game right through.
It's remade from the ground up.
Well, yeah, but it's pretty much the same game right through.
Anyway, that's not even what we're talking about. And going back to your point before, talking about is it on consoles, if you look at the main series, Monster Hunter was on PlayStation 2, Monster Hunter 2 was on PlayStation 2, Monster Hunter... It says try instead of 3. Monster Hunter Try? Monster Hunter Tree?
Like someone with PlayStation 3 only in Japan.
Where does it say that?
Yeah.
So, but it was released for Wii. An enhanced version was PS Portable and PlayStation 3 only in Japan.
Yeah, so that's...
And Monster Hunter 4 was 3DS.
Yeah, so there's been other Monster Hunter side games that have been on PlayStation 3. And whether they were for a Western audience or not, they have been on PS3 as far as I am aware.
Monster Hunter Frontier Online was on 360.
Regardless,
Monster Hunter Frontier G,
PS3. This is not a question of whether it is full console.
No, it's about how good the game is.
This is about this is the Monster Hunter that has been brought to the Western world.
Yes.
Monster Hunter has been huge in Japan forever. It's been one of the biggest games out for...
Sells well, yeah.
Oh, yeah. So it was actually quite a big mobile game as well, which is kind of surprising. And my mate, who was amped about Monster Hunter, had never played a console version of the game. They only played the mobile version. Okay. And it's crazy that a mobile game can get someone so amped about a game that they purchase a $500 console in New Zealand dollars for one game. A mobile game forced him to buy the console so he could play with his mates. Oh yeah, I wasn't going to drop a name, but...
We're not saying his last name, but you're just saying Caleb.
Yeah, so Caleb had the game on mobile. He absolutely loved it. Played it when he was traveling around
That
Europe.
is true. I remember, he did buy a PS4 basically because he was so amped for Monster Hunter, yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly why. I mean, a little bit of peer pressure, but hey. He still did it.
Yeah.
And it was only because of Monster Hunter came out, I bought it home, I started playing it, and he went, yo, buy me a PS4 while I'm at work. And before he had time to rethink it, I'd bought one on Trade Me.
I don't think he regretted it.
No, he hasn't. Of course not. He's wasted so many hours on that.
But so, yeah, we geez, we went around in circles for a little bit, but Monster Hunter
that
World,
was a real
Monster
bad
Hunter World,
derailment.
it's basically the next biggest games as a service game.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of, for the time being at least, it's dethroned games like Destiny and The Division as the kind of the go-to social online game that people are playing on consoles.
It's not quite an MMO, but it has the appearance of an MMO. Sometimes it has the feel of an MMO.
Yeah, a lot like Destiny.
For example, when you're doing a hunt and you've got 4 people in it, it feels like you're doing a dungeon in a game like ESO almost.
Yeah.
It's different gameplays, different strategies.
Well, ESO is an MMO.
It is, but you've got that MMO feel, but it just feels like you're in a secluded part of the MMO specifically.
And that's why I say games as a service is a lot like
it's not an MMO.
No, but games as a service isn't MMOs. You know, like it's like Destiny. Destiny has MMO aspects to it, but it also has RPG and first-person shooter aspect. So Monster Hunter World has these MMO aspects, but it's also a JRPG.
Yeah, and you're roaming around by yourself, and you're like, oh crap, this is hard. Fire a thing, and then suddenly you got 3 different people from around the world helping you do this quest.
Yeah. So
it definitely dances the line between MMO, not MMO.
Yeah.
It's like you're always connected to the world if you want to be.
Yeah.
But you allow yourself the privacy if you want it.
Yeah. And so it's become
quite cool.
Yeah,
it's quite a cool
that's
concept
become,
I've never experienced in a game before.
Yeah, well, it's become quite a normal concept that a lot of publishers are trying to capitalize on that at the moment after the success of Destiny. But Monster Hunter, how it stands out from those other games is it is very Japanese, and the entire point of the game is you've gone to the kind of the new world, and your job as a hunter is to explore this new world on your own or with friends that you can play with online, and track down up to 4 people, track down and hunt monsters. I mean, it's pretty much, you know, if you know what a Monster Hunter game is, or if you played any past Monster Hunter game, it is that, but built from the ground up with glorious visuals for modern consoles, PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and coming to PC soon. And did you know, Casey, that Monster Hunter World has, it was either today or yesterday, been officially announced as Capcom's best-selling game of all time?
Bullshit.
Yeah, of all time. So it's beaten every Resident Evil, Devil May Cry, Mega Man game. It's the best-selling game.
Really? Oh my god.
Yeah,
shout out to my boy Monster Hunter World. I'd just like to accept this trophy. Oh man, I can't believe that.
Yeah,
like you think about every single release that Capcom has ever put out. Like
they
have a
big library.
They have a very, very big library. And it's not a weak one.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And I think it comes down to
I think it's deserved.
Well, we're going to debate that.
I think it's deserved.
I think it comes down to the fact that if you play Resident Evil 7, let's say, right, and you have a great...
Oh, come on. Let's not get into that.
No. And you have a great time, then if your friend wants to play it, you go, yeah, you can borrow my copy when I'm done. With Monster Hunter World, you go, no, you need to get your own copy now so you can play with me. And I think that's what's led to the massive sales numbers.
Yeah, so, I mean, for example... Caleb bought a PlayStation.
Yeah, exactly. He bought a PlayStation,
just so he could play it with
not to play it later, to play it with you right now while you're playing it. That's why it was so impulse.
Yeah,
you know, so that's a big selling point. Probably why it's done these numbers. But that's the breakdown. That's the game. Yeah. Casey absolutely loves this game. He has told me he thinks Monster Hunter World is an early Game of the Year contender.
No,
what? You going back on yourself?
I'm not going back on myself. It's just like. It could be a Game of the Year contender, but it's not.
Oh, okay.
Not because I don't think it's an incredible game. It's an incredible game. It's an amazing game.
You're right there. You got the hiccups, mate.
Yeah, I got the burpee hiccups. Anyway.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a bad game, but all I'm thinking is we got a big year ahead of us, and I would not jump onto something as stupid as saying that we have an early Game of the Year contender in...
Was it
February?
No, there's a difference between saying this is Game of the Year in February. It's March now. It's March.
Okay, this is the best game that has been released so far this year. That I have played. So this is the best game this year that I have played in the category of games I've played this year. So I
don't even think it's fair to even me say...
Really?
No, for me to say a game that I think is
played every
because,
game.
Well, the thing is, like, I've been... way more focused on finishing my backlog from last year, like Assassin's Creed Origins, Breath of the Wild.
Yeah,
And so I haven't even had a chance to try out Shadow of the Colossus,
that was
Metal Gear Survive, Celeste. There's a breadth of games that are kind of out now.
Well, we know how most of those games went down.
Celeste for 10.
Yeah,
from IGN.
9.5.
That's lower than 10.
Is it though?
According to numbers.
You take out the decimal point.
According to maths.
Hold on, you take out the decimal point, you're talking 95 versus a 10. No, you can't argue with that
logic.
No, okay.
Point being, so Casey, whatever, Game of the Year aside, thinks it's a great game. I am arguing, on the other hand, that I think it's all right. I think it's very middle of the road. Casey, come on, we've rambled long enough. You take this away.
Yeah. Okay, so I mean, in Monster Hunter World, you drop into the game. You do your first couple quests. Monster Hunter is a very self-explanatory game. What are you here to do? Hunt monsters.
Whoa! I thought this was a dating sim.
Exactly. So that, point to point, all you do in this game is hunt monsters. There's no real variance. You come into the game, you hunt monsters at the start, you're hunting monsters at the end.
You've named one of my biggest flaws in the game.
I don't think it's a flaw.
Why?
Because that is what you signed up for when you bought this game. I knew that all I was going to be doing is hunting different monsters. And the thing that makes this game so great is the fact that...
The thing that makes this great game so great.
Shut up. The thing that makes this game so great is that it takes... so most games have lots of variance. They have the identical gameplay through the entire game, and they create their variance through story or through difficulty, increasing in difficulty, or through different missions, different tasks, different ways to achieve things. In Monster Hunter World, you have every option available to you right at the start, right from dot. You can choose any of the 14 weapon types, and then you upgrade them from there. You have every playstyle available to you right from the start. The game's difficulty progresses as your weapons upgrade and progress. So I found the game is as difficult at the start as it was at the end. Not because the monsters are easier to kill, but because now I am a god and I can go back and kill that first monster in less than 2 minutes when it took me 20 minutes at the start of the game. But the final monster still takes me 25 minutes to kill.
Right, hold on. So you're saying those are good things?
I am saying this is a good thing because they have taken a different approach to keeping the player intrigued by the game. They have gone, this is the game. You are here to hunt monsters. And they have kept me interested in the game by giving me endless options to upgrade armor, upgrade weapons. So, for example, Caleb, he's not here today, but we'll talk about him.
Why'd you say that like he passed away recently?
Look, because it was really sad. He got hit by a truck.
He got hit by a truck, lost 3 of his legs.
Hey. Not everyone knew about that third one. Anyway, so he liked the longsword. And no matter how much I pressured him, it wouldn't change. He owned 7 different longswords by the end of it, and they were all incredibly strong, so he was able to choose a longsword for any monster he wanted. He was always getting new weapons, and he was having so much fun finding a new weapon, unlocking a new weapon, seeing the damage it did, how it affected different monsters in one weapon tier. I used 4 different weapons. I didn't unlock anywhere near as many different variances of the weapons in the specific trees or skills of the weapon, but under the 4 different weapons, for example, you could not play this game and do everything in one round. There's no way you could do that. And I was always I'm trying to complete this game relatively quickly. I'm not rushing through it, but I'm trying to complete it.
You've been playing it over a month.
Yeah, I'm trying to go relatively. I've got 95 hours into the game. I'd say to do the main story, you could probably do it in 50?
I think I did it around that.
Yeah. So I've got 95 because I keep going back because I want different gear.
Mm.
And I'm doing the same. I'm hunting the same monsters, and each time it's different because it's amazing how much it changes with a different weapon. Your play style with the insect glaive, it's an entirely different game almost when you're using a greatsword because it's nowhere near as easy to bounce around and hit it. So you can be a lot quicker with a larger, more powerful weapon, but you have to be a lot more careful not to get hit because you're so open and vulnerable. You have so many different strategies and play styles that you have to insert and manipulate depending on the monster you're fighting, the weapon you're using, the strengths of the weapons. Am I using a elemental weapon? Am I using an effect type weapon? There's so many different strengths, weaknesses. What armor am I using? What buffs do I have on my armor? You know, what amulet am I wearing? Like, there's so many different variances that actually have such huge effect that what you were doing doesn't actually really... I never got bored of what I was doing because there's 1,000 different ways to attack the same task at the same time. And no matter how I was attacking it, I could go back and do it differently. So
Right.
and it wasn't similar enough for me to be able to get bored.
Right.
And I'm someone that gets very, very bored of games very quickly. And I'm amazed that I have not put the controller down and gone, screw this, I'm moving on to something else.
Right, I have a lot of problems with everything you just said.
Cool.
I think you are so fucking wrong. Dude, like, what you've just explained to me sounds like a marvelous spreadsheet. Not a fun game. Look at all these stats, you know. I love the fucking progression of now I'm on 290 power instead of 270.
Yeah.
It's like, that's a number, you know? I found that, now I have no problem with the idea that this is Monster Hunter World. You are here to hunt monsters. That's not a premise I have an issue with. The premise I have an issue with is, I completely disagree. You're doing the same thing the entire game. The entire game is exactly the same. Like, take this for example. I started off with the dual blades, right? I fully agree with you on the point that changing your weapon does change your playstyle, and it changes how you tackle each encounter with a monster. I started with the dual blade, so I was always in the fold. I'm right up front. I'm slashing away because I decided to go with them because I read online that they're the kind of the quickest and most intuitive weapon for a beginner to start with. Now, I just continuously got hit again and again and again, and at this point in the game, I'm too low level to be taking this amount of hits. And so, you know, I started practicing more and going, okay, I'm going to be tactical when I strike, and I know this move, the swing, takes this amount of time, blah, 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 blah. But I found I was never doing enough damage, and it was so stressful to spend 40 minutes constantly watching out to not get hit by a one-shot kill, you know, because sometimes, like an Anjanath, which is a big T-Rex looking motherfucker, he breathes fire on you once, you're out. And if you get hit 3 times, you're out for good. And a mission that you might have spent 45 minutes on, you've got to repeat the whole thing. It's not, when you go back and repeat the whole thing, it's not a new experience. You can't try to tackle it in a different way. You tackle it in the exact same way you did before and hope you don't get that one-hit kill.
So this is a game that you're rewarded for. You're rewarded heavily for doing side quests and straying from the path of the main quest.
So my point, going back to my point, is that so I progressed from there. I ended up going with the insect glaive for a bit because you recommended that. I thought that was all right until I then hit a barrier with that weapon, and I ended up going with the bow in the end because what I found was the bow takes absolutely forever to kill enemies with, but I'm able to be at a far enough away distance that I'm not blindsided by a one-hit shot. And so I went with that. Now, when you go with the bow, you've got 3 moves you can do with it, basically. Mm-hmm. You can just shoot the arrow. You can do kind of like a charge shot. Or you can do this kind of shot where it's like a close-range... Shotgun, basically, yeah, where you fire like several arrows, and if you fire enough in succession, then these kind of traps fall down from the sky, and kind of, they can, stagger an enemy.
No, wait, that's when you can fire those... You can fire that at any point. You can fire.
But you do one shotgun, right? Yeah. And then you fire into the air, shoot the trap. Then you do one shotgun, and then you fire in the end to do the trap. That's how it works.
No, you can just do a shotgun in the middle of any type of
Oh, yeah, you can
firing.
do the shotgun, but I'm talking about the trap move.
No, yeah, the trap move.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's what
Yeah.
I'm saying. I'm saying you can do the trap move at any point.
But you still have to do the shotgun alongside it.
No, you don't.
You do.
No, you don't.
I played the whole fucking game with the bow and arrow.
Bro, I played with the bow and arrow too.
Well, whatever. Point being, so those are basically the 3 moves. Once I worked out how to use those,
Yeah.
that was it. It doesn't change from there. And upgrading your weapon doesn't give it any new abilities.
No.
It just adds a stat buff.
Yeah.
And so I was disincentivized to try other weapons because instead of putting resources into them, I was like, I have to just keep upgrading my bow so that my bow stays at a good enough
so
level.
you had to put extra resources in just to get your other weapons to the level that your current weapon is.
Exactly.
Then you had to upgrade it further.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I had to put in all this side effort just to be able to. And when I'm talking about putting in the effort, side effort, this could be a couple hours just to try something
easily.
new. Yeah, just to try something new.
Easily.
So I was disincentivized to try anything new, and I was constantly using the same weapons. I felt like I was doing the exact same thing 50 hours in that I was doing in my first hour. Nothing changed.
So
And-
with that,
but-
I would say that unfortunately, I would say your weapon choice was poor. So,
But why
the-
design
I-
a game where there's some weapons that are designed in a way that aren't fun for the player?
So I love the bow when I used it. I didn't use it all the time though. I don't, like. I'm not. See, you have a very specific play style when it comes to a game.
Mm.
You know, you pick up a game, you put down a game. There's no in between. You
No.
you start a game, you finish a game.
I start a game, I finish a game, I don't play anything else in between, like I'm committed to that experience, yeah.
See, I'll play 3 games. I'll have a main game, and then I'll get frustrated, and I'll have something I'll dabble with on the side, but nothing serious.
I do that too. Like, I will jump in and play like 20 minutes of Mario Kart 8 with my brother each day.
Yeah, right. So
So I do that as a side thing.
Anyway, what I was saying was actually relevant to my point. My point was that the bow. I think there are some weapons in Monster Hunter. There's a reward scale, so there's an ease of use scale, and I'd say that the dual blades are real easy. The bow is extremely easy as well, but dual blades definitely the easiest. Jump in, hit, jump out.
Yeah.
Jump in, hit, jump out.
Yeah.
Insect glaive also very easy. It's my main weapon. I love it to bits. It's super fun dancing around in the air, jumping on things. And when you,
I think it was the most interesting of the 3 weapons I tried out.
It seems that way when you first grab it. So, at the moment, my insect glaive is set up with a very high strength poison buff on it, like max level poison. So, there's purple smoke coming out everywhere, and I've got a blast Kinsect.
Mm.
So, my Kinsect hits constantly, and every time it hits and attacks, it leaves a blast dust. I jump in with my blast dust, hit it in the head, and then boom, 120 damage.
Yep.
So I think the stat that the number it gives you, it's a very good point. You're constantly just trying to raise that number up a little bit. But there's also ways you can go around it. Like, for example, the blast dust. You have the ability, and because there's critical hit damage, and I understand what you're saying with the whole the Japanese factor. So a Japanese game will very typically be very in depth and have a lot of stats to increase and decrease, and it can be a bit overwhelming.
And I don't necessarily have a problem with that. I have a problem with that is the only positive factor people can talk about.
See, I could go into other stuff, but that's just what I'm dancing on at the moment.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I think that is the huge portion of this game, and that is why this game is so good.
The huge portion is the stats, but I put it this way. One of the big points you made at the very beginning is saying, I like the fact that compared to other games, right at the beginning, it lays out exactly how you do everything. Like this is the game.
It's very overwhelming.
It is very
It's
but
so
I don't
overwhelming.
like that because when I was playing Assassin's Creed Origins, right, which there's a grind for that as well. Like in the new game, there's like a loot system, there's levels, all that kind of jazz. But the thing is, when I'm leveling up, when I'm doing missions and stuff like that, it's incredibly common to put this in games, but it's common because it works. A perk system, a skill tree, so I might be targeting enemies in a certain way for this long with my shield and sword, right? Because that's the most efficient way to do things. But I level up my bow to a point that, okay, now I have kind of almost a sniper feature on my bow because I've got this kind of ability to zoom in the sights, and I've unlocked a skill where I can actually control the direction of the arrow as it's flying. I'm given new ways to play. Like, this is just an example, but I'm given new ways to play that make the game feel different 10 hours in than it did 1 hour in, keeps me engaged, keeps me interested, keeps me playing and encouraging me to try different things. Monster Hunter World does not do that. It says, this is how you play the game. Play it like this forever. We're not going to give you anything new. You're not going to get anything exciting. The only thing you're rewarded with and can ask to keep going to receive is new armor or a higher powered weapon, right? That's purely numbers. They don't actually give you new ways to play. The armor doesn't give you the ability to...
So are you suggesting that you would rather only have 3 weapons at the start and have 14 by the end? Because that's what you're suggesting, really.
I think not even by the end, maybe halfway, you have the tier one...
Unlocking new weapons.
You have the tier 1 of weapons. So you get 5 base weapons and you go, these are the easiest to work with, try one of these.
So
when you 15 hours and you get the tier 2.
So when you play an MMO, and you have to start right at the start, and you go, are you a mage? Are you a heavy? Are you a thief? Are you... That's what Monster Hunter does. But instead of saying that there are 4 classes or 5 classes, here are 14. And you can switch. So halfway through the game, I switched from my Insect Glaive, which was OP for where I was at. I was absolutely slaying with this weapon. And I went to a greatsword. And by God, the game changed. Everything about it changed. I thought this is going to be difficult. I'm going to have to change my playstyle. I practiced with it in the practice arena. I actually watched a YouTube video of how to play this weapon efficiently so that when I did my first hunt with it, I would at least have a base idea. I didn't expect to be great, but I'd have a base idea. The entire game changed. The entire way I approached every single thing changed. And what I had learned about monsters, the only thing that I had learned that was useful with this new weapon was, oh crap, it's rearing up, dodge roll, dodge roll. That was it.
So when you got this new weapon, did you level it up immediately to a fairly high level?
No, in all honesty, when I got my greatsword, I leveled it up like 2 spots, and then I ran out of stuff I needed to defeat. I don't know what it was. Maybe a Puki Puki or whatever.
So I'm guessing you then went and killed those low-level enemies and leveled it up, right? So that's my problem, is I have to do all this work just to playstyle. Like, it's not like in say, and I keep going back to Assassin's Creed, but it's a game I've recently played. In Assassin's Creed, I'm getting skill points for playing how I like to play, right? Which is, say, a sword and shield. And then, when I get bored of that, I can spend those skill points on, say, another thing I'm interested in, like increasing my bow. So the fact that I'm going through this entire game, and then they go, you know what, I want to change how I play. I'm going to have to go and do 6 missions I've already done to get the gear I need to do that. You know, and these missions are not short. So when you level up to a high enough level, going up against the weaker enemies you started up against, it might go down from 40 minutes to 10 minutes. But I often found most of my encounters were 15 to 40 minutes. Right? That's the average length of most of the encounters I had, 15 to 40 minutes.
That's
and
a 25-minute window.
Yeah, but, the easier ones were 15, longer ones were 40, depending on what I was fighting, right? And it was infuriating, because there were so many variables that could fuck up this process for me just because I wanted to change my playstyle. I could have gone through the entire fight and then suddenly just get killed at the end, and I have to redo that whole entire encounter. Simultaneously, I could go through that entire encounter going, okay, like I went, when I was first upgrading my weapons, I went down the fire route, and so I needed a lot of Anjanath parts. I went and did several Anjanath missions, would spend half an hour doing the mission, and then not get the part I would need. I would get the part I already had plenty of and not get the actual part I needed. That was infuriating, because then it just meant, well, shit, I've now got to go and repeat that exact mission, even though I was successful, just to get the part I need. Because
you're complaining about the main structures of the game, though. Like,
I know, and maybe
you were complaining about not things that make this game bad, but reasons you do not like this game. You're not complaining about things that mean that this game would be bad to the average person, but why this game does not fit your personality.
No, I am arguing why this specific, maybe it's the type of game in general, but it is Monster Hunter World. Like last week when we talked about Prey, you specifically talked about how it is not your type of game.
Yeah.
And on this podcast, that is our job. I am here to argue points that people like me with similar tastes as me would go, actually, I agree with what he's saying. So this isn't for me. Because my point being, if you were like me and you were mainly a single-player, mainline it type of guy, this game is not for you.
See, I think this game is for you. I think it could be for you, but you just need to understand that it's a 50-hour game.
I understand that.
And it's not a straight path to the finish line. Yes, it is, and it is, essentially a straight line, but you do have to zigzag a little bit to get there.
And see, I think that's fine. I have no issue with doing side quests. I usually do the majority of side quests in a game. But to get to the ending, because that's what I'm going for. I'm going from point A to point B, and I'm happy to go different directions along the way, do side quests. But the fact that I think to myself, okay, I need to do side quests to get to the next story mission. That's fine. I'm happy to do that. But when I'm given a list of missions and it goes, here's new missions with monsters that you haven't fought before. And I go, okay, cool. I'll do that one. And then I go, well, actually, if I do that mission, I'm not going to level up in any kind of way. I'm not going to get any experience from completing that mission. But if I do this other mission that I've done 5 times, I'll get parts that upgrade my bow. So I'm incentivized to do a mission that I've already found boring because I've done it 5 times instead of doing the new mission because the new mission doesn't give me the parts I need. So it's not about having to do side quests. It's about the structure of what they're telling you to do.
The new mission unlocks new monsters that allow you to make your gear even stronger.
No. I'm not talking about a new main mission. I'm talking about like a side quest, like an expedition.
Well, yeah, no, I didn't do every expedition. Of course not.
Yeah, so I'm saying there was an expedition with a monster I hadn't fought before. Like, what's the one that looks like a cobra, spits poison? It's like a cobra head on a big lizard body.
That spits poison.
Well, you know the one in the rotting veil? Is I ruled the weakest one in that area.
And the rotting veil that spits poison.
Maybe it doesn't spit poison, but it has a cobra head and has like a long body.
Black one.
Yeah.
The electric one. There was paralysis.
Might be paralysis. It's not electric though. It was in like the bottom tunnels area and it had all the baby ones.
Yeah, I know the one you're talking about, black and yellow one. I can't remember what the fuck it's called.
Yeah, anyway.
That thing's a piece of shit. You kill that in 2 minutes.
No, yeah, and that's my point though. I got a side mission that came up, an expedition, and it said, fight this thing. And I went, oh, cool, I've never fought that thing before. At least it'll be different, right? But then I went, well, I could do that, or I could just do the same mission I've done again and again, but I'll actually be rewarded for the one that I'm repeating, rather than being rewarded for doing something new.
So
that's bad game design.
So with what you say, with the whole, like, I have to go back and do all this other crap to get weapons, when I'm upgrading a different weapon that I don't have, I'm not upgrading it in the exact... I'm not... I've got a poison kinsect. I'm not upgrading to a poison greatsword. I'm upgrading to a blast greatsword or a fire greatsword, or who else cares? And they're parts that I've gathered throughout the main missions, but I have not consumed, so I have them in stock.
But you never get enough from just doing the main mission. You've always got to do extra.
No, of course not. So I have to go back, and I might have to fight 2 beasts with my strong weapon to get my greatsword up to tier 5, which is where I was at the time that I would like to say. It sounds like you have to go back and do a lot, but as long as you're aware of where your resources are, it tells you can upgrade this weapon to this point with these resources, and then you go back and look. Oh, right, now I'm going to be short back here. I'm going to need to kill that. Ah, yeah, that's all right. So I go back with my strong weapon, kill that thing in 5 to 7 minutes, because I'm on high rank quests and I've gone back to kill a low rank monster. Because that happened. I was like, man, that sucks. Why do I have to go back and kill this weak ass thing that's, it's not going to give me anything? Yeah. I went back and it was like 7 minutes. I was like, that wasn't that bad. And I feel pretty good about myself.
I never grinded enough that I reached that point.
See, but it was because I chose, I'm going to try something new. And when I did, the rewarding factor, so killing something with the insect glaive, it was my favorite weapon, it still is. But the reward that I felt killing something with a greatsword, it was very, very strange. I have never ever felt. Okay, so I would say it's like, you see those Call of Duty back in the day, Modern Warfare 2, 360 no scope, getting Moabs, whatever. I feel like the reward you get from a no scope kill in Call of Duty when you originally did those no scope kills and they were rewarding. The reward I feel from killing something with a greatsword, or even landing a hit with a greatsword, is probably 10 times that of what I did with the insect glaive.
Right.
Like, it was huge, because with a greatsword, you had to work so hard to get each hit, but each hit did 10 times the damage that a regular... Like, you're doing 200 damage compared to 50. 50's good. So, but you felt so much more reward with that greatsword, and when you kill that thing, you're like, I'm so good at this game. It's not just like, I danced around and I dodge, You actually have to know the beast, know how to dodge. And it's a game where I feel like you are very rewarded for paying attention, learning the monster, learning your weapon, figuring out the ultimate way to attack the mission. And then when you achieve it, and it's not overly hard, it might take time, I feel like the reward is different based on the weapon, and the harder of tier of weapon you get, the quicker you can take out a monster, but the harder it is, but the more reward that you receive in satisfaction from that.
See, I just feel like when you're doing 40-minute fights, like the time never went down enough for me. It never the weapon. Hold on. The weapons never changed enough for me. It wasn't satisfying progressing through the game. But I feel like we've gone in circles with this for a while, so I'm going to hit you with a point I know you can't rebuttal.
Wait, hold on. The high rank quests, I'm able to do a high rank
Odegaron
in 18 minutes. With a great sword.
You're just talking numbers with me again.
You're talking 40-minute quest with a bow, though, and I'm talking like there are so many different ways to attack an issue in this game.
I just don't feel. My point being, I think we should drop this section right now because we're not. I just don't feel you're incentivized.
It's a straight argument.
Yeah, I just don't feel like you're incentivized enough. My next point, though, is right, and you can't rebuttal this. So there's no way I can see you rebuttaling this. The story in the game is crap. It's virtually non-existent.
Yeah.
It's virtually non-existent.
I mean,
You go to a new location, you walk up to the monster has a cool cinematic opening shot, that's the story. That's every encounter.
Yeah. If you look at the history of the franchise, though, this is the first game in the franchise with a story.
Really?
And it's got an extremely compelling story for the franchise. There's not a game that...
How is it compelling? Go and fight the monster. How is that compelling?
Well, the base story. If you remove it, I mean, in the Western world for games, we're very, very used to stories. Every game.
We're very privileged. Yeah.
I wouldn't even say we're privileged. I'd say it's our approach to gaming. If you look at all games that come directly from the Japanese market, how many of those have very, very compelling stories? It's about the gameplay.
The Final Fantasy series.
Yes, but that's
the Persona series.
Yeah, that's a Western.
Catherine. No, those are all Japanese. Those aren't Western at all.
Hold on. Final Fantasy is somewhat Westernized.
No, it is straight up JRPG. It is straight up JRPG. Okay. It's not Westernized at all.
Regardless, Persona...
You can only make that argument with Final Fantasy 15.
Yeah, Persona is a story-based game.
Yeah.
It's different. They've got separate tiers. This is... I would almost say Monster Hunter is almost an arcade game. An arcade-style game.
Okay, explain that.
Come in, do this, go home. It's never been a game... It's
mindless.
Yeah, it's never been a game with a storyline. And I'd say
it's not been
the first ever storyline that this franchise has injected into it, I'd say... So the premise of the storyline is you arrive at the new world. There's instability in the world. You arrive at this new island.
See it, though. You never see any instability.
You're doing previous Monster Hunters.
Okay, but in this one, if this is your first one, which it is for a lot of people...
enter the game with Zora Magdaros. You're already on a boat. Zora Magdaros
explain what that is.
Zora Magdaros is a giant...
Elder dragon
that's, looking to die.
Yeah, it's going to find its final resting place. It's this magic volcano-sized elder dragon. Yeah, and you've come to this place, the New World, to study it, basically,
to figure out why all these
why these
issues are
dragons-
happening
yeah.
in the regular world.
Yeah, why these dragons come to this place every 100 years or 50 years or so. Whatever,
So
10
Zora
years.
Magdaros is meant to go to its resting place. It doesn't go to its resting place. You need to find out why. So it's not necessarily the most compelling of stories, but I would say, even though it isn't a compelling story, there is a storyline, and it makes sense in the respect of the game.
But
why
this-
you are doing each thing, it does make sense. So you go to an area, discover all the monsters, figure out how they act, then you go to the next area, discover all the monsters, then you go to the next area, discover
Yeah, so
all
it's
the monsters.
incredibly repetitive and non-engaging, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that the gameplay changes based on the story, but I would say that the story at least goes... The story is mainly there to go, this is why you're going to this area.
Yeah, and that's poor storytelling. It's literally a reason to say, and a very thinly veiled reason to say, this is why you're doing the next mission. It's not you can't even call that story. It's basically like some dialogue sprinkled in to add some sense to it.
Hey, don't forget the awful lip reading.
Yeah, that's because it's the lip reading's based around the Japanese dialogue. And
Okay.
so the
Tell me
English dialogue looks
Tell me the
terrible.
cinematics are bad.
I think it's really exciting when you see a new monster fly in or appear or whatever. That looks dope as fuck. That's not a story. That's a short trailer for a promotion for a monster.
Yeah.
It's not a story.
And I would say that the story is 80% cinematics.
Yeah. Okay. Well, here's
So the
here's,
story isn't necessarily a compelling one. I don't
Yeah.
think that's what they game. This is not a game that's set out to tell a story.
No,
It's
no,
not
that's
even
what
a
I'm-
game
Yeah.
that's set out to have a story.
No, it's not.
I think they
it's-
just put the story in to please the Western market
Yeah,
to some
yeah.
degree, because I don't think a Western market is able to pick up a game and just play Monster Hunter for 20 hours straight without
Yeah,
knowing why the
yeah.
fuck they're doing anything.
Yep. No, and I can agree with that. But I think for
It was
people,
enough story
but,
to
no,
keep my
But
ADHD mind going.
I think for people like me who went in there expecting a lot more than we were given, they need to know. You know, and I think
I think that's fair. Yeah,
and I also think they need to know that for a game that prides itself on saying come and kill monsters with your friends, it is horrendous that someone in your, like, as two friends wanting to play together, you have to, in your own games, go and start a mission, right? Because you have to go and start a mission, watch the cutscene for that mission, and then one of you has to exit out of your game and go into the other player's game who's still mid-mission to be able to do the same mission, because you can't play the same mission as someone if you haven't already seen the cutscene.
So this was
That's-
shit. Fuck you, Monster Hunter. That was bullshit.
Yeah.
You shouldn't have done that. It was ridiculous. That was the worst thing that I've ever seen in a game.
That's terrible for an online game.
I live with Caleb. Me and Caleb play this whole game together. We get to a mission. Oh no, why can't we join it? Oh, we both have to start the mission individually, watch the cutscene together in the same room on two separate TVs. Then we have to both exit out of the mission, start it again, and play the game together.
Yeah, that's horrendous.
For people like Chris, I don't live with Chris. It was
It was
what
impossible.
an absolute nightmare.
Trying to orchestrate
No.
over voice chat how, hey, we're doing the mission. Oh, what the hell? Have you...
view the
forgot to
cutscene,
ask.
bro. Just
Yeah,
play it.
yeah,
Start
yeah.
the cutscene.
Yeah, start the cutscene, do that, then send us a notification. We'll jump in then. Hey, I've just watched the cutscene. Do you want to jump in? Oh, no, we're on a side quest now. It was awful.
Hey, bro, busy. You got to go to mum's house. I can't
Yeah.
be bothered playing with you. Switch offline. I'm just going to play by myself.
Yeah.
You know, it's just... okay, worst part of the game. Hands down the worst part of the whole game.
Yeah, no, and as
So the
someone who's arguing
the
for it, you can't
multiplayer-
even deny that.
No, the multiplayer aspect was a little bit of a letdown.
Okay, and that's because we're running a little long. That's where I want to finish up. The multiplayer is too difficult
I
to
think
master.
it was actually okay.
Okay,
With
so
communication, it's okay.
this was pitched as a game that you could play on your own, but it's going to be far easier and far more entertaining if you play with friends.
Not easier with friends, way harder when you play with one friend. If you play with four friends, maybe it's a bit easier.
No, so, okay, my experience, I tried all three options that are available to you.
It's easier when you play with random fuckers online.
It is.
Way
Because,
easier.
So I
But when
started
you
the
play
game.
with your mates,
Yeah, I started the game on my own. And because Casey and our friend Caleb had started before I did. They jumped into the game maybe a week or two before I did, and so I had to do some catching up, so I started playing on my own. It was just the grinding in a game, grinding is nothing new to video games, and that's fine. Grinding in games is fine. But when you're doing that grinding on your own, I often found myself putting on podcasts and muting the TV just to have something to keep my attention while I was doing these mindless tasks. I then went, okay, I'm finally at a high enough level, I want to jump in with Casey and Caleb. I jump in with them, and they're basically carrying me. Like, the whole process of getting online as well was horrendous. Like, it was, oh, are you in the right lobby? Oh no, you're in another lobby. Oh, you've got to join our game here. Here's a notification. Join the. Okay, are you in the right world? No, we're not in the right world. Hey, have you watched the cutscene? Oh shit, no, I haven't watched. There's so many aspects that you have to pay attention to before you can actually get online and enjoy playing with your friends. You've got to go through so many hurdles, and they could have made it so much simpler to have the fun online presence. You jump in, 5 minutes later, you're playing with your friends, you're having a good time. It is not that simple. It's at least 10 to 15 minutes of organizing things, getting people on group chats, going through the right things you need to go through in regards to watching the right cutscenes, all that kind of jazz. So then I played with my friends, and I found they were carrying me because I was too low level. And then I think
rushed through.
Yeah, and then
we'd enjoy the game. We'd take. I think this game, the main thing to take away from this argument, whether you think it's a great game or a bad game, is this is not a game. You will not get the most of this game if you rush it.
No, if you are a story-driven, focused, mainline it type gamer, this game is not for you. This is for people who like to.
I think you can still enjoy the game though, but you can't enjoy the whole game to its full
I think
potential.
you can enjoy it to the amount that I did, which was it was middle of the road fine. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't great.
So this was a game that I wasn't actually keen for. This was hyped up by other people, and then once I got into this game, I'm a storyline gamer as well. I'm not here to muck around. You know, I've got ADHD. I get bored so easily, and I have been absolutely amazed that I haven't been bored of this game. If you give it the chance, this is a game that gives you the options to do things differently when you want to. If you want to. If you don't want to, if you want to get through and you want to get the story finished, this game will be very unrewarding because it does lack in story. It does lack in variance of monster fights. And it's up to you to choose different weapons and be real thoughtful about how you attack each problem differently to make the most of this game. It is very much up to the player. And I feel like if you take this game for what it is at face value, it can leave you a little bit lacking. But I feel like it gives you all the potential to make this one of the best games of the year if you choose to do so.
Mm.
If you do not choose to do so, then I feel like this game could be very... You will walk away going, oh, I don't know why everyone says this.
You have
so
to be
good.
committed to playing this game for a long time and grinding... And
I'd say at least 80 hours.
Yeah, and going back again and again and again. If you think you can come in and just enjoy the story...
So you say grinding, but grinding, when I think grinding, I think an unenjoyable experience.
That's exactly what it was for me.
But you do have a tendency to get a game over quick because you're often under pressure when you're playing games.
Yeah, that's true.
I am not... While I'm under a little bit of pressure to play games quickly, I bought this game and went, I don't care. I'm playing Monster Hunter.
Yeah.
And it's there. I only felt like I was like, if a game has grinding in it for me, that's it. Nah, not a chance.
Yeah.
But this game, I never really felt like I was grinding, even though I was.
Yeah.
And I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah.
But from someone who plays games from the same point of view as you, if you attack this with a different mindset and you're actually amped to play this game, it doesn't feel like grinding. It is grinding, but it doesn't feel like it.
Maybe all I'm saying is if you're the type of gamer like me, you've agreed with the points I've made, then maybe there's a better way to
spend. Do you agree with what I've said as well, though?
I can understand why you have that opinion and why you think that way and it suits you. It just didn't click for me. And I think if you love the sound of everything Casey said, this is a Game of the Year contender for you. But not for you personally, but for the person listening, this could be one of their favorite games of the year if this is the type of thing they look for. If they don't look for this type of thing, they're going to have an okay experience. But with that, I want to say, I guess we'll have to agree to disagree.
Almost.
Because we've gone on too long. We've got to still have time for the interview,
Almost
man.
If you're an MMO fan. An MMO fan is used to grinding, right?
I'd say if you're an MMO fan and
this game
is
killer.
If you're an MMO,
this is the single player game for the MMO fan.
I could
See you later, everyone. Good night.
I could get on board with, if you're an MMO fan, this is an awesome high pace action version of an MMO, right?
Yeah.
But if you are not an MMO fan, which is a lot of people,
all right, let's restart the podcast. I've figured out a new argument.
So we're going to leave it there, guys.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot more we could have gone through, but I think if you are listening to this by now, I think we've put up enough
You've made
points.
up your mind.
Yeah, we've put up enough points for you to make up your mind.
We've pretty much said the same thing over and over again, just said it differently, which is exactly what Monster Hunter is. So if you enjoy this podcast, go buy Monster Hunter. You will like it, and you won't be able to tell the difference. Have a good night.
All right, well, that's us for this week, guys. But stay tuned for the second half of the show, where I sit down and I have a talk with the developer behind All Walls Must Fall. Look forward to that. Awesome game. If you're into XCOM, Super Hot, or Hitman, you need to have a listen.
Super Hot, a game we cannot talk about on this podcast because there's nothing bad to say.
Nothing bad. But if you're into Super Hot, maybe you should listen to the interview developer.
I will
interview
be.
Blah blah blah.
I
Next,
will be waiting,
just like everyone listening should. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Hey guys, Chris here. Now, QuietStoriesBlog.com isn't the only place you can get Fist Fight. You can also find every episode on GoombaStomp.com. GoombaStomp puts out new articles about the games industry every day. Go to the bigger sites for the latest news, but come to GoombaStomp for more thoughtful and personal pieces. GoombaStomp also has a range of podcasts other than Fist Fight. N-Express breaks down the world of Nintendo, and The Firekeepers is a weekly hangout for Soulsborne fans. But now, let's jump into the indie interview section of the show, where we talk to the men and women behind some of the best games that you've not heard enough about. We discuss inspirations for the game, what kind of people it would be of interest to, and try get some tips about the development process. Today we have Isaac of In Between Games. How you doing, mate?
I'm pretty good, thanks.
Awesome to have you on here. And
pleasure.
today we are talking about All Walls Must Fall. So I kind of grew interested in this game. Having watched the trailer of it, it reminded me of kind of a mashup of XCOM, Hitman, and Super Hot. So if you were going to kind of pitch the game to us, or kind of anyone in general, how would you sell it to them? Kind of, just telling them about the game in kind of like a quick, condensed way.
Well, the classic kind of combo pitch, where comboing other games that we generally went for, is that it's Braid meets XCOM. So it's the tactical combat of XCOM and the time manipulation abilities of Braid, with a kind of syndicate vibe in terms of the cyberpunk setting. And then I guess there's the longer pitch, the elevator pitch, which is All Walls Must Fall is a tech noir tactics game set in an alternate future Berlin in the year 2089, where the Cold War never ended and the Berlin Wall still stands. And you have one night of clubbing to prevent a nuclear strike going off in the city.
Okay.
By controlling time-traveling secret agents.
Wow, God, that sounds pretty riveting, even in just a condensed little bit of info.
Yeah, I mean, that one we did find worked pretty well if you have to kind of put everything into a very short amount of time. But often it left people a little bit like bewildered because there's a lot going on there. So Braid meets XCOM was like generally easier to pitch.
Yeah, no, and I think I think that's a good way of kind of giving people a very easy way to go. Okay, I can kind of picture that. I'd like to hear more.
Exactly.
So, what was your role specifically in the game's development?
So I'm one of the 3 co-founders of In Between Games. We're like a studio founded by 3 former AAA developers, and I'm the programmer as well as one of the co-founders. So I basically did all the programming on the game. One of my colleagues was basically the artist, and another colleague was the designer. Although, considering being a small team, everyone did a bit of everything to some extent. But I was primarily the coder.
So you've talked about Braid and XCOM. Were those the prime inspirations, and kind of what were the big lessons or kind of key elements that you took from them and implemented in the game? But then at the same time, how did you make sure your game would stand out compared to them?
Well, the other game, which was a big inspiration, actually, was Rez, the PlayStation 1 era kind of rhythm-esque, shooter-esque game, where you're where basically that was the big inspiration for the everything happens on the beat concept, which is not part of the pitch earlier because it's more the presentation stuff. But yeah, like some of our original prototypes were much closer to that, actually, where you're in Res, you're kind of using your like targeting cursor thingy to like point at various flying abstract shapes, and then once you do that, you hear like a kind of little audio cues, little parts of instrumentation that go with the music, and in time with the music as they explode and you get points and so on. And that was actually our original concept, was kind of taking that gameplay and putting it in like this top-down tactical-esque, maybe a bit more Hotline Miami kind of feel of things. And that was kind of like our jumping off point of where we started out, and then the game kind of then took a bit more of a grounded direction and became more like XCOM in the sense of a turn-based, grid-based tactical game with cover and an isometric perspective and everything. But we kept that core thing from Res being that everything happens on the beat, which is like how we kind of present the game in the sense of how like the time mechanics work, because everything is measured in beats of the music. And that's kind of our turn system, where each turn is like a beat, and all your actions take like one or beat or half a beat or 2 beats or whatever. And then all the actual gunfire and everything happens on the beat. And yeah, that was definitely like a big part of the unique thing of the game. That it's not a rhythm game, but everything still happens on the beat, and you get this cool like rhythmic outcome when you.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. Taking the core concepts of one genre and then implementing them into another genre. So that being the rhythm game into the kind of tactical isometric type game.
Yeah, and then with Braid, and Super Hot, Super Hot, I believe wasn't actually, out yet when we started working on this game. But obviously it was an inspiration when it did come out. But our original concept with the time stuff was, taking all the various abilities you have from Braid, where you're playing a platformer, but you can undo time, or you're playing a platformer and you can move objects in different timelines, essentially, and like some objects move faster than others, and some objects ignore the time manipulations and some don't, and basically take those mechanics and see how they'd work in again like a tactical shooter.
So speaking on time is, it's kind of like a currency in the game. So like to kind of hack a certain computer or hack something, that will cost you time. Time will be deducted from the kind of amount that you have, but say you discover something important, you might get some time back. So how did this kind of specific part of the game's design, how did you go about fleshing that out and making it from a concept to something that's enjoyable to play?
Well, I guess that was actually something that was like a lot of iteration and, just tweaks and so on. And it was fairly, I would have to say, like, I'm, disclaimer, I'm not the primary designer here. But I think what kind of happened was we had to realize, we realized you need to have some kind of economy management, some kind of resource management component, other than just managing your health and your ammo, and considering that it's about time travel and that you do have these abilities to manipulate time, that like some kind of resource that's tied into time.
Yeah, it's fitting.
Is a good conceptual, like thematic fit. But then also we just kind of felt like essentially when we first had like one of an earlier version of the game that whereby you could undo time. That was like the first thing, like time power we implemented. That it was basically cheating because you can just go back. It's like basically save scumming as a gameplay mechanic, right? So we just felt like we had to tie that to some kind of risk reward thing. So we basically just threw a resource on it. And then we just thought, well, what is this resource that you're actually, it costs, the main thing, or the first thing that it basically was tied into was time, the time ability. So if you use a time ability, it costs a resource. And then basically we just thought, well, we don't want to have like 20 resources for every single different thing. Let's just use the same resource for everything and try and like thematically tie it together. So yeah, it basically, we iterated on it a lot, and we just kind of found different ways of tying the same resource. So, for example, when you hack things, it costs you the resource, but it also lowers your maximum amount, so that's like a kind of a long-term decision. If I'm going to hack this door at the beginning of the mission, that's going to lower my available resource for the rest of the entire mission, and do I want to do that? And then having it like just tick down with every beat as well. Like even if you're doing nothing, you lose a bit every beat, and then that is just a way of kind of having some kind of pressure on the player, so that you get a little penalized if you just wander back and forth doing nothing. So because you're supposed to be a secret agent who's a badass and who knows their shit, so he should be able to like get on with it. What was the last thing there? Yeah. I guess like it was also, an easy way to tie it in to like player upgrades and so on. But yeah, essentially it was just a lot of iteration, and we just found that we could tie this resource to everything, and it kind of made thematic sense. So we just did it.
Speaking of the time reversal mechanic, for a game that at face value looks very similar to All Wars Must Fall, XCOM 2 has found a lot of success in the concept of permadeath, and of your actions are permanent and they have consequence unless you save scum. But you've kind of removed that in your game and given the option to go back and say, oh, I wish I hadn't done that. Do you feel like that takes away a little bit from some of the kind of player's urgency?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. There's no doubt about it that that realization is actually something that you get when you're playing the game for the first time. That essentially the game has save scumming as a gameplay mechanic, and the hope that from our end was that people would then think about that and about what that kind of allows them to do in this tactical scenario. So because it's not quite as simple as that, because for example, in our game, the basic ability, the undo ability, which just basically undoes everything, like both you and the rest of the world, and everything that's happened goes back in time to 1 beat or 2 beats or however many beats you like before. But you, the player, still can use that to scout out the club, the environments, because there's a fog of war. You don't know what the layout of the club when you first start playing, because it's all procedurally generated. But you can explore the club, and if you wind up in a dead end, you can obviously turn around and just go back the way you came. But you can also undo time, so that everything else goes back the way that it was, which might be advantageous because some enemies might not have spawned yet and so on. But you, the player, can still see what you have uncovered, and you also get resource for uncovering things, and you keep that resource. So it's not a complete like reversal of absolutely everything. And then really the undo mechanic is just in a way a bit of a convenient tutorial mechanic to teach you the core concept, and then you learn these other mechanics, the rewind and the traceback abilities, which one of them undoes only the player and the other one undoes the rest of the world. And those, once you get into that, that's where it gets really headfucky, and you can do all kinds of strange things with paradoxes, whereby you can, open a door, walk through it, and then use the rewind to close, to be as if the door had never opened, but you're still on the other side of it, so you've kind of teleported. And yeah, but in terms of like the urgency, I mean, we do kind of fight that a little bit by basically tying it to a resource, so you can't just do it an infinite amount of times. And then later on, we add enemies which basically ignore your time abilities. So then you're kind of stuck with this situation like, oh, I've learned that I can basically cheat my way through the mission this way, but now I can't do that anymore, and you have to take that into account. So, for example, that trick of just opening the door and then undoing you opening the door. Well, if there's a guy on the other side of the door and he doesn't like your face and he's immune to your time abilities, you're no longer going to be able to do that because he's going to start shooting you.
No, I like that. I like that. That's a bit of give and take. You're losing some of the kind of urgency from if you made the choices permanent, but you're also providing the player with a kind of a new experimental way of adding kind of a more tactical approach to their actions and giving them actually more options to, go about finishing a level or completing a situation.
Yeah, I mean, and then on top of that, we do have permadeath. It's an option you can turn on in the game. The way that works is basically if you're dead or if your objective has failed and you don't have any time resource left, well, that's where it's really game over. And yeah, your character has no way of bringing himself back to life, or you have no way of bringing him back to life. So if you want to play like that,
But it's obviously not the intended way you've designed the game for.
Well, actually, to be honest, we did have that on by default, and but we just found that like a lot of I think that was maybe just a mistake. Like the early access period, we learned a lot of like what players who like the game actually like, and it is a bit more arcadey than something like XCOM, and I think it just attracts players who are not so into permadeath as a concept. So actually, we implemented it thinking like that it would be more roguelike-y. Of a game, and then we basically just made it off by default, so you have to turn it on now if you want it, which is actually how XCOM does it as well, right? Like Iron Man mode and so on are for the more hardcore players rather than the default.
Exactly, yeah. So switching things over from the systems to the art, the game's character animations, they're fairly minimal. So was that inevitably a limitation of your small team size that you kind of tried to handle creatively? Or was that like a purposeful art and design decision from the outset of the game?
Yeah, it was more the former, to be honest. And with only one artist on the team, it's possible that in general the game is a little overscoped in that we bit off more than we could really chew in terms of what we could do with a team of our size. So like the original concepts for the animations, actually, if you look closely, you can see that the clubbers, the kind of background characters who are just wandering around and dancing.
I noticed that, yeah.
Those guys have basically skeletal animations that where their arms are like, their bodies are chopped up into like pieces, like a rag doll essentially, and animated, which worked, but for the player character, basically we essentially ran out of time, and we basically decided that we wanted it should definitely have some animations, but we didn't have the time to put together the full set with that system. So my artist Rafal, he basically just did some quick kind of flip book animations where there's just several frames, and we just switched between them. Which I think also looks pretty good. I mean, considering the game is paused a lot of the time, it's not something that's so noticeable.
No, I don't. I don't.
It wasn't our original concept.
Yeah, no, I don't think it takes away from the game in any way. But it's interesting because, as I say, I mean, from the appearance of the game, it has some fantastic art design, considering it is virtually all created by a single artist. But I wanted to ask that question to go down the route of understanding of like what were some other things, concepts involved in the game that you you initially started with, and then realized that with your team of 3, the scope had gotten too big. Were there any other things that were initially on the storyboard?
Well, I guess the amount of content in general. I don't know if you followed us back when we did our Kickstarter and started talking about the game in public for the first time, which was, I guess, about 2 years ago. I mean, our original idea was that there'd be multiple playable characters, and that the game would take place in both East and West Berlin, and essentially have 3 acts. And yeah, we didn't get basically the funding to pull that off. So that's why there's only 1 playable character, and it's only in East Berlin. I mean, we kind of still see this as basically Act 1. So if you play to the end, you may find that the end is a little, it's almost like to be continued. Right. But I mean, we tried to we tried to make it a satisfying enough ending as it is. But yeah, our original idea was that the game would have a lot more length to it, and essentially, yeah, we made that one of our bigger stretch goals during the Kickstarter, and that wasn't reached, and we didn't get basically enough other funding from early access to pull that off. So I mean, that's
so you bring up Kickstarter. You may not have reached all your funding goals, but your Kickstarter was successful. So yeah, so kind of what do you think led to the success of that Kickstarter? Was it kind of promotion from the right people? Was it enticing reward tiers? And then following on from that, what were kind of some of your biggest challenges you faced following through on the Kickstarter?
Well, I mean, I don't really have any other Kickstarter campaigns to compare it to. So there is that. Like, this is the only time I've done a Kickstarter campaign. I mean, this is the only time I've managed my own project either. So it's a bit hard to say, but I mean, I guess like we found that we had a good pitch, a pitch that was fairly enticing for people in terms of the setting and the genre and the kind of theme and so on. So I think we had a bit of a natural audience. And then perhaps we just had a lot of luck in terms of, promotion from the right people. I mean, there are definitely some websites out there where if they link to your game, you get a pretty decent bump in, visits, and that translates to.
And did you feel like you were able to get a good amount of promotion at the time?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we had there was, especially these days where there's a lot of fatigue, there are a lot of larger websites that as a rule don't cover Kickstarters or even early access games. And we got, articles in places like Rock, Paper, Shotgun, PC Gamer, Eurogamer, Kotaku, who were about a Kickstarter. And we also had a bunch of YouTubers, like medium to large-ish YouTubers play the game. Who also generally, I don't normally cover Kickstarters, but this looked cool, so I decided to do it, and I think that helped quite a lot. Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's a bit hard to compare it to anything else because I haven't necessarily done another Kickstarter, and it certainly was a success. I mean, we started with a goal of 15,000, and we think we got 36,000 euros. Plus, a little bit more that came in after the campaign from selling T-shirts and things.
So,
yeah. In terms of, I mean, challenges, certainly running a Kickstarter campaign is a lot of work, right? Like it was at least, the 1 month of actually running the campaign and the, about month to 2 months beforehand preparing. And
what were the more... Well,
was your question more about that, or about like fulfilling the?
Well, a little bit of all of it. I mean, like, what were the most kind of time-consuming parts of actually running the campaign, and then after the campaign, were there any major issues in fulfilling the rewards and following through?
I mean, the main thing, is like essentially that you're spending. Basically 2 months you have to basically spend doing marketing activities, and when you're a development team, that's not necessarily your strong point. Like we're not marketing. We did have a bit of help from an external marketing agency who were very generous and donated a little bit of time to send out press mails, but for the most part, we did it all in house, and we did the trailer and the video ourselves, which is the biggest single chunk of work. And then during the Kickstarter, you've got like a month. We've talked a bit about this before elsewhere, but you have like a month of the campaign, but most of the pledges come in the first week and the last week. So those middle 2 weeks, you're kind of sitting there twiddling your thumbs and panicking that your graph is not going in the right direction very quickly. So, just not going crazy is perhaps the biggest challenge. Afterwards, though, I think we structured the thing very well in terms of how we wanted to do development. So the core idea behind the Kickstarter was we've basically already got a game that's playable and fun, and we want, and it's also already had funding, right? Because we also had fun. We had the Kickstarter actually was a relatively small amount of the total funding, because we had 70,000 from a funding organization in Berlin, and Epic gave us an Unreal Dev grant, and we had some of our own funding. So overall the project budget was somewhere around 150,000, of which about 35 came from the Kickstarter. So it's a decent chunk, but it's not the whole thing. So we already had a year and a half development at that point, and the Kickstarter concept was, we want to basically launch the game on early access and do a closed beta for the backers, the people who really want to play the game. We want to use them as our testing pool to make the game great and iterate on and get feedback from. And then all of our stretch goals, we had a stretch goal every 5,000, I believe it was, and all of those, we made 4 of them, were essentially monthly update packages. So, we wanted to do the classic early access concept of basically just updating the game every month with new features and new content and so on. And we had an idea of what kind of stuff we wanted to do. And so we made each of those into a stretch goal, so that we could then deliver those stretch goals pretty much guaranteed. There was not really any risk that this stretch goal would be some outrageous idea, because each stretch goal was just a month of work. And we were able to, we did that a bit. We kind of, the first 2 stretch goals, we basically did exactly as we'd said we would. And then we launched an early access, and then we started getting real feedback from people who weren't Kickstarter backers. And that actually led us to change quite a lot of our planning around how we were going to continue doing the updates and what kind of stuff we were prioritizing, because a lot of the feedback we got during the beginning of the early access actually had us rework some of the core systems, because it turned out they were not as finished as we thought they were, which was, really great feedback, but then it did mean that we juggled stuff around.
So
and then I guess some of the Kickstarter rewards, the backer portraits. So if you backed at a certain tier, you got a portrait that our artist drew. Some of those just took a bit longer than we had originally planned.
Okay.
But, it was no major thing.
So jumping back a little bit further, your team came from developing Dead Rising 2 and then moved on to this project after Dead Rising 2 ended up being kind of cancelled or put into limbo.
Dead Island 2. Dead Island 2.
Sorry, what was that?
It was not. Dead
sorry.
They all sound the same.
My bad. Dead Island 2. What was the biggest kind of lesson you learned from the ending of that game and your time working on that, and then transitioning over onto this?
Yeah, one other quick correction. So we've been informed by, people with lots of money that Dead Island 2 was not cancelled. It was just given to another developer, so it is still in development. But essentially, the contract between the company I was working for, which was Jaeger Development, and the owners of Dead Island, which is Deep Silver, was cancelled, and basically everyone who was working at Jaeger on Dead Island 2 lost their jobs, which was about 120 people. And the company went insolvent. What I learned basically, I guess I knew this on some level already for sure, but what I learned was that you're just a little fish in a big pond, and life is gonna basically do stuff that you have no control over, and that's we all know that on some level, right? But it really hits home when it's something like that happens where you have just no control over your own destiny. So essentially, that was like a real reason to go indie. The smaller the team, the fewer the number of moving parts, the less complicated everything can be, and the more control each of you have over what is going to happen. I mean, that's a bit philosophical. I mean, unfortunately, I'm still bound by all those
No, of course.
NDAs from that time. So I can't really go into any huge detail. But it definitely hit home for all three of us that we, if possible, we would love to become independent developers. And it seemed like a good opportunity for us because we were all made unemployed at the same time. And in Germany, there's a very, very generous safety net for people who lose their jobs through no fault of their own, as well as like some great funding opportunities for basically starting a new company and for making things like video games, interactive media. So essentially we learned that for me, it was, I think, like the fourth project I'd worked on that had been cancelled, and the third time I'd lost my job in the industry, which is pretty standard. But
that is rough.
Hit home, like, okay, there's it's pretty rough, and there's nothing you can do about it for the most part because these are decisions made by the people looking at giant spreadsheets with lots of zeros in them, and that's about it. So. I kind of realized the only way I'm going to ship a game, it would appear, is if I just fucking do it myself. So.
And so you talk about in your country getting help with funding from the government in regards to startup companies and also people looking to fund kind of game development. So how does that process work? Do they give you a lump sum and just say, look here, take it, we want to see you succeed? Or is that something you've got to worry about paying back? Like how does it work for indie developers and new businesses?
Yeah, I mean, it's not quite as nice as that. Although there is a bit of that. I mean, there was, so it depends. So there's the main bit of funding that the game had was from an organization called the Medienboard Berlin-Brandenburg. And they are basically a funding organization run by the local state governments of Berlin and Brandenburg, which is like Brandenburg is the state that's next to Berlin, basically. And they have like a budget of something like, I don't know, 300 million or something like that to fund mostly movies. Right. So they fund like, whatever, Mute, I guess, that came out last week, I believe. And Tarantino shot a movie here and all that stuff. Anyway, so they mostly have a huge pot of money for movie funding, but they have a small, like 1 million a year, basically, for interactive media. And the way that works is basically it's a loan, but you only have to pay it back if the project actually makes enough money. And essentially you can pay back your own costs first with the money that the project makes, and then you pay them back. So it's a very generous loan. It's like no interest. And I think if you don't pay it back in 10 years, they just forget about it essentially as well. Don't quote me on that. I can't remember the exact.
Yeah, but stuff,
it's along
in general,
those lines.
It seems like a very supportive culture for helping businesses grow in your country. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's still pretty small scale, but I would say that organization in particular has led to Berlin being a bit of a indie paradise at the moment. Like at the moment, I'm here working out of an office called the Saftladen, which means juice shop, which is like a German joke that I won't go into. But essentially, there's like something like 25 developers here working for around 8 or 9 different little studio organizations, and most of us have had some kind of funding from the Medium Board. And like it really has helped with creating an environment where you can take a risk, make a game that's like, I mean, they do require that you have some kind of plan to make the money back. It can't just be a pure art project that's going to be sold for free. Or given out for free. You actually have to sell it for money and, have a marketing plan and all this kind of stuff. But, at the same time, a lot of the projects don't make the money back. So it's a pretty great organization. I mean, things are changing a bit because now there's this, I don't want to, now there's a bit of a, hype around VR and so on, even still a little bit later. And so some of the money is starting to be shifted into basically non-game projects that are using VR, which I think is a bit of a shame. Because, often it's by the big movie studios that are doing this. And
fund themselves,
able to handle that kind of financing themselves. Yeah. So that was the loan side of things. And then on top of that, the government, for the newly unemployed, you can, you basically, if you've been working, basically just essentially the dole here is quite generous because it's a percentage of your salary for a year. And then as well as that, if you want to start a new business, you can get some additional help basically from the government to pay for like things like your health insurance for a year. So that's just basically where they give you some money, but that's not for the company, that's for you personally.
All right, so
it's a little different. But still, like I'm from the UK and none of this exists there. So
it's not a global thing. But last question I want to ask you, what were kind of some of the biggest internal differences between working for a AAA studio, which can have dozens to hundreds of employees all working on a single project, to moving to an indie team where you've got your hand in a whole ton of different pots, and you're working your own creative vision rather than someone else's?
Well, I mean, there's a lot. I don't know exactly what the biggest would be. I mean, you have things like the fact that your colleagues are sitting right next to you, and you don't have to walk across an office to find someone who's in charge of one little tiny thing that you need done. You can just have like so much easier time of it communicating and just getting your point across, and not having to like sit through endless meetings to ensure that everyone's on the same page and write lots and lots of documentation to do that. So you have the communication thing. Obviously, it's a bit different. You can still be an indie and have a publisher, or at least you can still be a small team and have a publisher. But for us, not having a publisher meant, we didn't have that additional layer of having to deal with another organization and all of their structures. Yeah, but I guess like the biggest difference for me personally in terms of my like day-to-day work is essentially that I wasn't just a programmer. I mean, even though that's by far and away the majority of what I spent my time doing, I've also done a bit of writing, and I've done design, and I've done some sound work a little bit. Like I've done UI layouts, and obviously I've done like financial reporting and accounting and dealing with German bureaucracy and all that stuff. Some of it I enjoy more than others, but to be honest, like when thinking about what I want to do next, one thing that hit me a few weeks ago when I was doing some writing, when we were trying to finish up the story of the game a couple of months ago, I guess now, was essentially like, if I go back into AAA as a programmer, there's no way in hell I'm going to be doing any writing. And the same when I made the trailer, which was, I kind of took the lead on that a few weeks ago, just before we launched. Like, there's no way I'm going to be doing something like this if I go back into AAA. And that's kind of, I think, there's like the fantasy that one has of like, oh, I'll be my own boss and I'll make my own project and I'll, choose what I do, how I spend my day, and all that's like accurate, but actually just being a bit more.
Yeah, the fun of experimentation breaks up the day.
Just doing one thing for me is but also like things that I'm not like, I never trained. I went to university to learn to be a programmer, but I've never trained to be a writer. I've never trained to like be a video editor. And so it's just interesting, like having the ability to try out some of those skills, which, and decide whether or not I like them, or whether or not I'm good at them, or whether or not I'd rather die than ever have to do German bureaucracy again. Yeah, but yeah.
No. Yeah, no. All I want to say is thank you very much for coming on here, being so open. I am super pumped to kind of see more people get their hands on All Walls Must Fall. I'm sure you are too. Where can people find it?
Well, you can find it on Steam and also on itch.io, which is a wonderful platform that I heavily recommend you use, especially as we take a bigger cut of your purchase price. And also on Green Man Gaming. And
Are there any plans to put it anywhere else on consoles, possibly?
unfortunately, not. No, yeah. So now it's on Windows, Mac, and Linux only. And yeah, we don't have any plans to put it on any other platforms at the moment. It would be great, but yeah, probably it's not going to happen, to be perfectly honest.
No, hey, no worries at all. Thank you so much for coming on here,
pleasure.
Isaac, and it's been a pleasure.
Thanks for having me, Chris.